Garden and the Moon is a knowledge center bringing together teachings and insights, experiences and stories, people and beings. Welcome back, Melissa. It's so nice to have you back on the Garden and the Moon podcast channel. You shared many interesting topics with us. I remember the first one was regarding the new healed whole Mother Earth and what it meant and how it was already there and how we could already connect to it. And I remember like the feedback I got from that was really huge, because suddenly people understood that, we're not working towards an ideal that's gonna happen in like 1,000,000 years or 100 years, but it's already there now, and it's so precious in how we're connecting with some also harsh realities. So that was a very powerful one. And then the second one was around prayers, because you just released your book on prayers, invoking like lots of the ascended masters that you work with, and understanding your outlook on prayers and how to connect with other realms was also really interesting. And so for this new conversation, I think again, like each time I talk to you, I feel like we're opening a book that's infinite and there's so much we could talk about. But I think, you've been sharing with me that you've been receiving recently some important messages around the connection between new energies and new frequencies and our human bodies. And I think this speaks so much to all of us, because I think like all of us in some ways or another, we feel that our bodies are shifting. We feel that our bodies are receptive or struggling or adjusting. And I think, like we can take it from a very down to earth approach, or like, oh, I don't know why suddenly like, like this my legs hurt, and maybe I should take this pill or whatever. But what you're offering, and that's really going to be the topic of this podcast, is that, well, you could take that pain to another level, and another level of what's happening beyond just the organic level, but it's also like the spiritual level, if I would say, or the almost like the divine level. So, yes, I would love if you could, first of all, share how this outlook came about. Like, did you, and again, people may know you from listening to the two other podcasts, but people may not yet. So maybe you could also explain how you receive those messages, and what is that process for you. I know it's a huge introduction and it's a huge question, but I'm sure you're gonna handle it perfectly.
Really, I'm pleased to be here and so happy to be invited back again and share with you and share with people all over some of the perspective of what might be going on in this tremendous paradigm shift and this tremendous consciousness shift that we're having on the planet. So I think that Boy, I think that there's a tendency that all human beings have to get very caught up in the I, like what's going on with me? How do I feel? What's going on around me that's causing me to feel this way? And sometimes we can get sort of very uh, forgetting of this giant connection that we have, not only the connection that we have with the planet, the new healed whole Mother Earth and the Earth itself and all the living beings on the planet, but also the connection that we have with the spirit, And so one of the things that our bodies have that is particularly been fascinating to me because of the way I was introduced to it and because of what I've learned over the past 40 years, is the chakra system. So the chakra system is something that I never heard of. When I first began to wake up, we call it waking up, which maybe it can begin to answer the question you have about how this works and how I get guidance and how all this happened. And I think that the term that we use a lot in sort of this new age or this new time that we live in is that we are waking up. Humanity is waking up to, a spiritual reality. We're looking at the world right now and we're saying, gosh, look at all the problems, look at the wars, look at the fighting, look at the issues, look at the separations, look at the, us and them, and, whether it's around race or it's around gender or it's around social, economic, leveling. There's this constant division. There's this constant, like, putting things into categories, putting things into right and wrong. And what we begin to realize is that hasn't worked. you know, it hasn't worked. All these power struggles that we've had, all through our history of humanity, doesn't work. What works is unity, community. What works is moving into this consciousness of holisticness. And we've watched in the last 20, 30, 40 years that awareness has been expanding. People have been realizing, oh, we have to take care of our planet. We can't, dump chemicals in one area and not realize that it affects another. Our ocean systems are all connected. Um, I remember when I was in college and I took geology for a while. I was in college on the east coast of New York, of Long Island, and so our ecosystems that we were talking about in geology or biology, of course, focused on that area. And I remember the guy talking about, when the coastal beaches are affected here by building, they're affected all, they connect all over the world, and it was like, it triggered something in the density of the self that I was then. And, when I look back, I remember that there were like pebbles on the path all along since I began to wake up as a child. I would just look at things and think, well, why is it this way? And then you get the answer, well, because it is, like, why are people of different races, not treated as equally, or why is this or that? I remember just asking, my parents that, and they were busy with life, and they would be like, oh, like, oh, well, it is, so you'd still be pondering it. So the wake up for me took place in 1987. That was something was going on. If any of you recall, called the harmonic convergence, when a lot of planets aligned across the board in conjunction with each other. And I think they were all in Taurus at the time. And so that I started feeling dizzy or out of my body or tingling, at the base of the spine, which later on I found out was maybe Kundalini. The body would heat up, you would get really heated. And at the same time that was happening to me, there was a lot of people coming to the area where I lived that, had just written books on metaphysics. So all of a sudden I was in this whole new world, of learning of like energy healing and energy and chakras and channeling and it was like, whoo, And so I just kept being drawn to certain places. And I guess, like Spirit says, you're drawn to the teachers that you need when it's time for the student to get to a next level. And, things would just start. So then, you have this expansiveness all over the place, and you have to take that expansion and bring it back to the self. So I think that is what is happening, right now on a global level. Many bodies are expanding. The bodies that we have that are connected through these energy systems called the chakra system, that is the one system in the body that does connect with your organs, with your glands, with your passageways in the body, and also connects with the subtle bodies, the layers that are in your aura. And so I think this is key. Going back to the chakras, and we do lots of exercises around them to ground them. So when you think them, every chakra connects to an organ, every chakra connects to something in your glandular systems, and every chakra connects to your energy bodies. So the first three chakras, the red, the orange, and the yellow, connect with our earthly self, the bodies that we're talking about that I'm conveying or bringing to consciousness, as many other people are, that these bodies are changing. These bodies are undergoing a shift to be able to hold more awareness and more energy. So in the past, every shamanic tribal group of people, many religions, they have experiences where there's prophets, where there's clairvoyance, where there's oracles. These are some of the different terms who have who get messages. Like if you think of Christianity, you think of maybe Joan of Arc. She received a message, and that message she brought to the government, and the government at that moment listened to her in the moment, and then later on didn't didn't like it and threw her away. So I think we're in an age now where many people are getting insights, getting visions, getting awareness, having dreams. We're in a very intense time in the last couple of months. If you're an astrology buff, you know that Neptune is in 29 degrees Pisces. It's a time of dream times. This just started happening. So people are, the veils are thinning. People are aware of things that go beyond the facts or go beyond the logic of the moment or the density of the moment. And so, um, what I really wanted to talk about today, we originally spoke that we would speak to about the chakras, but what I wanted to speak to today, as we got a little bit further along, was I began noticing when people have been coming from readings lately, when I start to look clairvoyantly at the energy body, that their bodies are really different. Their energy bodies are really different. And I had a conversation with another healer I know. Her name is Jennifer Jensen. She's an amazing astrologer. I'm sorry. She's an amazing acupuncturist, begins with A, and healer, amazing healer, with a very strong spiritual practice and teacher, and is trained a lot in the Chinese medicine and also trained in some Ayurvedic medicine from her teachers. So she was saying the other week, "Can I ask your guides a question?" And I said, "Sure." And she said, "Why am I working on everybody's gallbladder meridian?" I thought, "Oh." And right away it just came through me from Kuan Yin, one of the ascended masters that I work with most closely for me personally. And she immediately said that people had made the leap or the jump or the ascension. So we hear these terms: ascension, higher realms, moving into, a paradigm shift, polarity changing from matter to spiritual, coming into a spiritual renaissance or awakening on the planet. So you hear a lot of these different things. You can just probably go on YouTube and find many people speaking about it. And so um, Kuan Yin on the full moon in June had channeled that we are in this big swing, this big wave of energy. I mean, we know the wave of energy has been there and been coming for a long time, but particularly in the next, 6 to 8 months, 10 months coming into 2025 and through it, we're going to see a lot of that wave of energy stirring up the things that are um, contracted and in the material plane. Things that aren't working are going to sort of explode. Like sometimes if we don't, I think of giving birth. So if you talk to midwives, they'll often tell you that when a woman is giving birth, it's very intense. You have to let go and go with the waves of energy that bring the child into the world and out of the body and out of the cocoon. And if you struggle, it's really painful. And so I've talked to many midwives over the years, and they say that the ones that just let go have a much easier birth, but the ones that are fighting their body, they just can't release or let go. It's so much harder to have a natural childbirth.
Hmm.
And so, historically, In the many, many years in the past, we've gone away from natural childbirth and we've gone, away from midwives and we've gone into, oh, let's just drug the body and, and then, you're just not present with this expansion and contraction. So I think that part of the challenge is accepting that there is pain in the body when something new is being born, when a new you is being born, just like when a physical baby is being born from a woman's body. When a new you is being born, you're going to bump against the things that are contracted. You're going to hang on to them. So let's go back to what Jen noticed and asked. So what Kuan Yin said in the June full moon, she mentioned something about this is like the separating of the wheat from the chaff that's in your old biblical references. And she said, it's not coming from outside of you, it's coming from inside of you, it's coming from your own choices. So we're in this process of our chaff coming up to the surface, things that don't resonate with the higher vibration that have kept us locked in struggle, that have kept us locked in duality, that has kept us locked in separation, are having to be faced within. As each person faces within, that collective starts movement and the collective consciousness changes. Now, back to why does the physical body, why did I notice it looking different? Why did Jen ask that question about the gallbladder meridian? So then Kuan Yin went on to say, in Chinese medicine, all of the organs, so then the meridians that are connected to those organs, and of course the gallbladder meridian runs through the whole body. It's up at your head. It's here in the middle of the forehead, which I think is kind of interesting. You can have head pains here that has to do with your right here. I'm touching my forehead. You can't see that, but
Mm-hmm.
um, that would be, that could be hormonal, a headache there, but it could also be the gallbladder meridian because that comes up, all the way down the body. So it's not just the gallbladder, but in Chinese medicine, the gallbladder itself is the decision making. You know, it's our
Interesting.
decision making space. It's where we decide. And so if we have trouble deciding, a lot of times we could have gallbladder upset, like we can't step here, we can't step there. So Kuan Yin basically said that on a soul level, a lot of us, most of you that will be listening to this for the most part, are people who have chosen to ride that wave of ascension to move into that higher reality. At the same time, the 3D reality around us is the dual parts are breaking up. We're seeing racism, we're seeing gender inequality, we're seeing wars, we're seeing religious issues, we're seeing political issues, in your country, in France, in the US, in England. I mean, the politics is just intense. We have wars going on in Africa, in, Israel and Palestine and in the Ukraine, in Europe, and, South America. There's all kinds of issues everywhere. So that is the density of still hanging on to the struggle. That is sort of a collective example that we can all look into the mirror. If something bugs you in the news, how could you bring that back to the interior struggle that's in yourself? And how could you find a way to resolve that? So I think the body, it's really important to take care of the body right now, to listen to the body. Those first three chakras, the red, the orange, and the yellow, they deal and they are sort of developed when we are developing from a fetus to an adult. They're developing in the denser realm. So they're the denser chakras. They deal with the material world and with our body. So the very red one that goes down the legs and starts at the tailbone, and we'll have some kind of movement if we're going to wake up. That where the kundalini moves up the spine, that one is dealing with our grounding, our feeling of safety on the earth, and the second one with emotions, and they connect to elements. So the earth element is your root, the water element is your belly, the fire element is your personal power solar plexus. So of course that makes sense. If that's out of balance, people get angry, which we're seeing a lot of that right now. The heart chakra is wind, the throat chakra is sound. So that's why I think there's so much sound healing, sound baths, a need to go sit in nature, listen to the waves on the beach, soothe the body in that way to bring things together. So our bodies are the vehicle that our spirit or our higher energy decided to incarnate in. It's the vessel that holds the spirit, right? And so, if we are connecting more to the spirit, being aware of it, so being able to channel, being able to have insight, being able to find peace, in a space of expansiveness after we meditate or we pray or we, chant, and find balance, we begin to recognize, okay, we're bringing that down into the denser part that's fight or flight, the root chakra, that's fear based, that is emotional. We're bringing this higher in. We're integrating it right now. Where in our bodies between these higher chakras, the heart, of course, where we think of love and expansion and peace, that is the bridge. So the one thing that I think is going to help all of us move into healing is bringing peace into our bodies. It's very hard to heal the body when the body's in stress as well. Okay. So I think what I noticed, what she noticed in her work is that Kuan Yin basically said, so some of the parts of the self are still holding trauma, karmic patterns, memories that we have of, oh, the guys with the big guns are going to get us. We have to resist. Then we have to start hating us because they hurt us. And then what are we doing again? We're doing separation. So what we need to do is to recognize all of this, find ways to bring that peace into our bodies and connect not only, find out what the physical body is protesting, like what is my decision making? What is the voice that says, yes, I must do this? I must move into peace and harmony and I must, write this book or make this decision. And even in knowing that I must do this decision, I go through the process of recognizing that every decision, every action has a reaction. So every decision is going to have what would the word be? have a, can't think of the word for the
Reaction,
moment. Yeah, reaction, but it's also going to have
repercussion.
yeah, exactly. We're going to have some kind of experience if we choose this and don't choose that. So maybe we choose something that's true to our heart and we know it's going to disappoint somebody else, you know? And we live in a time when it's talking about you need to live your truth and be in your truth. And if your truth makes you aware that I'm going to make my family unhappy if I don't, uphold this past, or I'm going to make this or that or person unhappy. So if it has ramifications, every action is going to have ramifications. So we do look at those. And so sometimes with the very right thing to do, there can be sadness because you're
Mhm.
leaving behind a part of self. So we're going through a death process, a death of a way of life, a death in the body, and the physical body is actually shifting. So one of the things that I noticed is people's chakra systems look different. There's like chakras building between chakras. There's chakras activating that are in the higher bodies that you don't normally see. So we normally connect with the ancient Sanskrit tradition of the seven chakra system, but there's many more chakras in the body as well. So I don't know if this is answering your question at all, but I think that the real issue we're having now is so the higher vibrational place in the past has always been a place that you mentioned it in your introduction that we're longing to get to. We say our prayers or we have our faith or we listen to the preachers over the years and we look at the horror going on us. And some people can, during a war or during suffering, human suffering, which is very paramount on the planet right now, and we get angry or we get hurt or we get frustrated or we get depressed. How do we keep our faith? So the faith was always, well, after this it'll get better, better days are coming, whatever's going to happen. But I think now the recognition, just like the recognition that the new healed whole Mother Earth is here, the recognition that we are here on her at this time of transition, uh, the old has to fall away and there has to be a new way of being in form. The material world is a form world, and the form world is in the process of change. And
Mm.
so that means each one of our forms is in the process of change. And we do know that it changes because we go from a baby to an old person, so we know that our body changes. But we are beginning to recognize that if we were in sovereignty, if we were sovereign beings, our own sovereign being, not, we would be more connected to the system and how it works. And I think we're in the process of understanding that. There are teachers out there and people out there and neurologists and scientists and, all kinds of people coming together and realizing, wow, this system has more um, abilities than we realize. The DNA in the body, there are parts of the strands of DNA we weren't using, and they're coming in and being used, you know? So I think that where we are right now is recognizing that as much as we all want to believe in the paradigm shift and the light in humanity and the love within people and the light coming into the bodies and changing them, we all get caught in, oh, I don't like it right now. I want the outcome to be whatever my picture is of perfection, of joy, of nirvana, and where it really happens that it is in the now. Is the
Mm.
transformation has to happen in the now. So we are in that process of transformation, and there are parts of us that I have to stop and be with the parts of myself that aren't digesting the energies yet properly, that aren't integrating, and I have to, stay with those and pray with those and look at what my fears might be, and so or find a right practitioner that's working with energy to help reflect back to me or confirm for me what's going on internally. So,
Wow.
so
Thank
I
you
think,
so much, Melissa,
yeah, go ahead.
for this amazing answer, actually. That raises a question. I'm wondering if this new process of transformation and, of receiving these new frequencies and energies is is new. Is it the first time in humanity that this happened? And one of the reason I'm asking that is because, often when, I would have dialogue or conversation with other people on, that deep feeling that I have that of course we're transforming, of course there's like a shift happening, in our heart. And, I often hear back, well, no, because history is repeating itself all the time, and wars have been going on for years and years and years and years. And this is human nature. Human nature is that, And look, even like back in the days when there was like enlightened people, this would happen. And I wonder what would be the right answer in a way, and how is this transmission novative, new, compared to before? Or did that happen before? Did maybe in like other galaxies or other realms, maybe there were like this kind of like, again, ascension, destruction, and rebirth? I hope that
Definitely.
I'm making sense with my question.
Well, it's a broad question. Which is why I think we always have to go back to the individual self and work out the issues there. But we're an individual person, but we're also like a planet, and then we're also like a galaxy. We're part of this phenomenal whole. And coming into sovereignty, I think, is recognizing that, like I am the created, I'm also the creator. Wow, those are big concepts. When you talk about, I like the way that you talk about this, the history repeating itself. And, just looking at the history of the United States, for example, in the First World War, from say the Civil War, the First World War, even before the Civil War, like the bringing in of slavery, the way the rules were just kind of changed. A law was made to support people who wanted to build these big plantations, and they chose, to make Africans less than other people and bring in slavery so that they could continue to build these large cotton farms or whatever they were, plantations, tobacco, and have workers, you know? And so when you look down the line and you look forward in the United States, you see the same kind of thing, the oppression of a race or the oppression of females or the oppression of people to keep a status quo. And I think of what I was referring to earlier is we do the same thing in our own selves. You know, we repress an idea that that's not right because
Mm.
the status, we would upset the status quo if we said that was not right. You know, if we went and we
Right.
said, this isn't right, you know, slavery isn't right. You know, if the people, I think a lot of people that were on the other side of the wall in slavery, that were the enslavers in the families or whatever, probably knew it wasn't right, but they would repress it. And I think when you repress a part of yourself, you get distorted, and that distortion can lead to anger and pain, and then more aggression towards you know, towards the actual evil thing or the terrible thing. So um, what I have seen is that we grow in a spiral. So just like our human DNA, there's a tendency to go back to something and, and deal with it. So in my own growth, I would have spurts of awareness or growth that, freed me up from old patterns, and you realize this pattern doesn't work anymore, and you have a sense of freedom and you expand into your new level of reality. And then an energy wave comes again, wake up, and you're spiraling up again. And on the way to spiral up again, you're going around and dealing with the remnants of what you didn't deal with before. I hope that makes sense. So if I
Yes.
look at this on a collective level, I can see that this can be the Armageddon, if you would. This can be the end. This can be the last battle, in C.S. Lewis's Christian books, The Last Battle. This can be the last battle. And, the recognition is it's not about having more tanks and more money and more power and more men to throw into the war at the other. At the end of the day, it always ends because, there's a crushing. But I think it can be like, oh, I have to stop. If we really did beat our weapons into plowshares and all start communally farming, it would be different. So when the people actually recognize that they have the sovereignty and the power, and they just say, I don't want to do this anymore, the system starts to stop, and it
Mm-hmm.
has to break down. It has to, like, once that engine stops, it starts to fall apart and bits and pieces, end. So my point is, has this happened before? Yes, there's always been enlightened beings. I was studying some Buddhism the other day with a Geshe-la, and he was telling the stories of translating from Tibetan Shantideva's passages in the way of the Bodhisattva. And, one of the things he said at that time, they could fly. They still had the energy of being able to fly. They were lighter beings, and as you said, the earlier beings, there's lots of stories about times when things were more kind of in balance and more enlightened. And it seems we've fallen away from that. So I think, we went through a series of growth, just like you do as an individual, like you get rebellious and you want to change. You don't want to be like your parents or this or that. And then as you get older, you gain a little bit of wisdom. So I think collectively we're gaining wisdom and we're at that edge of breakthrough, and many are breaking through. And what to do, a British astrologer, Pam Gregory, that I really love to listen to. She said she used a phrase. She called it divine neutrality. And it's probably what I would call from my Buddhist teaching background. I would probably call it the middle way. Finding that way to be at peace in the middle way. From my channeling aspect, I would say getting out of duality and coming into wholeness. So however you want to look at it, she used the word divine neutrality. That we have to maintain divine neutrality and not get caught up. When you look in the news, there's constant fights and wars and, this and that. And at this point, it's like mudslinging. It's like on social media, I see it all the time. Somebody that I followed as a musician posted just a picture of himself with a political, t-shirt on or something, and people were immediately attacking him, and then others were attacking the ones that were attacking him. It was immediate. It was like,
Mm,
you can't, say or do anything without creating this divide again. And energetically, we are moving into wholeness. So this is the backlash of it that doesn't want us to move into wholeness. So I think it's, that the growth has always been going on and we're reaching the top of the spiral. If I was to teach on the chakras right now, where we started out with the grounding root one, that's the one about being on the earth. And one of a great exercise for that is walk around barefoot and breathe in the earth and walk to the beach and go in the grass, which we hardly ever do walk barefoot, right? And breathe in the energy and bring it up. But, each one that we go up deals with parts of self. And then when we get to these higher chakras, especially the third eye, this is where the energies meet. In the Hindu nadis, this is where there's three energies like building around your spinal cord, like the caduceus in the medical tradition, the two snakes
mhm,
around. And this is where we transcend duality. So I believe that we are opening, our eyes are opening to the fact that it doesn't work. Like you
mm,
said, am I going to be in this negative spiral forever? And I have to tell myself the same thing about eating habits or depression habits or worry habits or looking at social media habits, I have to break out of them. I have to get out of the loop. And so we do things like breathe or, work with the chakras or bring in energy or change our eating. So, yeah, your physical bodies are undergoing a lot of change right now. And I believe partially that has to do with the fact that people are waking up to extra gifts that have been dormant for a long time in the systems.
mhm. Great.
Yeah.
And I think, one thing about this middle way or like the divine neutrality, it's a very interesting concept to me. And I've often, tried to connect with it because I often find myself, like torn between the idea of like speaking up and sharing about this process that we're experiencing and this, like these kind of realizations, and also like keeping it for myself because I do also realize that, we live in a world where, we're being asked to be in the duality also. And I
Mhm.
was wondering how do you approach that? Or I understand this is definitely an internal work, first and foremost. And is that enough? Or is there like an urge, of like speaking out more?
I think that's going to depend on the individual. The getting to know yourself better and to really develop that um, wisdom inside yourself to know when to share and when not to share. So another aspect of the third eye, not only, the crown, the third eye chakra, another aspect of that is also discernment. You know, and when I first woke up, I used to, my background in this lifetime was being trained a lot in Catholicism, so Christianity, but the Catholic aspect of it. So 14 years of schooling and so on and so forth. So that was the big part of the spiritual training that I first had. And there was a lot of things that I would hear as the Bible as a little kid. So, like, don't cast your pearls before swine. I remember hearing that as a little kid, like, probably daydreaming in church. And then you'd hear it, and I'd ask my mom, like, well, what are swine and why are pearl? I guess the pearls caught my eye, because as a little kid. And she explained what it was. And I just remember thinking, why would people throw pearls in the pig pen? I don't understand. And so when I first woke up, I would start to hear phrases in my head over and over and over again, to like the point where it's like a little like worrisome. And one of the ones I heard was, don't cast your pearls before swine. And it was a recognition of like, oh, when I first woke up, I ran around telling everybody what I saw. And, I realized one day, I was just so caught in it that some people were laughing or some people, and all of a sudden I understood, not everybody's ready to hear what you have to share. Not everybody's willing to listen. And so, if the desire to share it is really strong, then you kind of sit with yourself and you go inward. Do I hear to write a book? Do I hear that the best way to share it is to become a healer and practice that healing? Do I first recognize that my push to share it is because I don't believe it enough and I need, it's like you've got to go back to yourself and see where it comes from. So I always called this a program neuroses, to help you wake up. And I had a lot of them, like Save the Children, the racism thing. Those are things that were with me as a child. I saw things and I wanted to do things. So there's that part of us that always wants to do and forgets that it's a whole picture and everybody has a part, and then I have a part within that part because I'm a part within the whole. Remember, I'm the created and I'm the creator. So sometimes, like taking some time to lean back and look at the choices and the ramifications and really pray on or meditate on next step for me, not acting in a total outburst, but
Mhm.
taking some time back and say, really thinking about it. So I do think that, it's a process we all go through of how to discern. So the higher level of wisdom is discernment, the lower level is judgment. So I'll judge this is wrong or right. But discernment sometimes takes a little bit longer to develop inside yourself and, to have that balance to be able to go there and not get blown away, you know? The
Mhm.
old parables, they talk about the seeds, and so the seeds get dropped, and the wind blows some away, but the ones that fall on the fertile ground. So to me, the fertile ground where I'm gonna take root and really grow in something is the practice, and
Mm.
finding the practice that I can go back to. So sometimes, in the beginning, part of the urgency to go out there and share with people was actually training myself to recognize that I needed to practice and needed to really embody whatever I wanted to share. Like, am I doing it?
Mhm.
Am I just wanting to tell everybody else to do it so it can reflect back to me that that's okay to do it? Or am I really doing it? You know, am I
So
really living?
interesting.
Yeah, and that is sometimes not as exciting because remember when you wake up, the expansion sometimes feels exciting, and then coming back to earth and saying, "Oh yeah, I want to go out and save the world, but I have a responsibility. I have 2 kids and no husband, and I have to make money or whatever it is. I have to take care of myself." Then that requires some, you know, am I running away from something or am I moving towards something? So I think self-doubt is very debilitating, but I think self-questioning is very powerful at this time. And so
Mm.
that brings me back to your question. It's a good question that you're asking. Um, I do realize, and I watch my thoughts a lot, that when I see these bad things happening, whether they were in the past or in the present, and there are many things that are just wrong out there, I want to right them immediately. But I also have the wisdom to know that it has to come from the inside out, that it has to be an awareness for people that I can't go in with a magic wand. I'm not a savior in this lifetime. And
Mhm.
I still feel that pull sometimes to be the savior. So I have to trust that the strengthening of each individual is strengthening the collective.
Mm. I can so deeply feel that actually, and your work is all about that. And like going back to what you said about the bodies and how it's a reflection of like more spiritual movements and shifts, and how you're seeing the bodies of people acting a little bit differently these days. Like, do you have any advice or recommendation on like maybe parts of the bodies that people should nurture even more? I mean, I understand that it's a very individual thing, obviously, but I think of the heart, for example, and I think probably for all of us, the heart is something to nurture and connect with a little bit deeper. Like, are there other elements in our body that you feel like could be interesting to look at from a practice perspective? And Also, I think the chakra works is amazing for that because it kind of speaks to everything. But is there any specifics, especially in a time of like wars and chaos and people being lost with their sense of divine roots?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely believe the chakras are super helpful across the board. When I look back at my history, I realized that I had bumped into them when I was first, waking up. And, you know, in the last year, especially at the beginning, last couple of years, especially at the beginning of COVID, it came back around to really introduce people to them, to practice with them, to breathe with them, to understand the energies. But actually on a physical level, since you're asking it that, is like, I would think just noticing what you notice. Do you have a pain in the neck all the time? Do you have a pain in the head all the time? Um, I would say digestion, because we're integrating energies. That means that we're having to bring them in and they're having to digest. So, that obviously means looking at our eating habits. And one of the things that I think that we often do when we're nervous or we're not feeling well is we go back to trying to nurture the self. So the very first thing that a human baby does is root and start to look for the connection with the mother's heart, breast. I think that's the heart chakra. So, of course, being as loving to the self and others as you possibly can, holding the light and finding the way to hold divine neutrality. And so, some people drink to suppress feelings of discomfort, drink alcohol or take drugs, or, we live in a very easy to get refined sweets, and I think that there's a lot of like wanting to grasp the sweetness right now because there's so much not sweet in life, so that you might tend to want to indulge in sweets and just, pull back. Then there's the mental, the crown chakra and the third eye chakra. We're very attracted to social media and to getting on Instagram or Facebook, or getting on just the TikTok. I don't know, things that just distract us. But also looking at media for hours and hours really affects the brain. So, going back to nature and
Mm,
spending time in nature, unplugging from the news, and looking at your reaction to trying any of these things. Yoga, chakra attunement, yoga asanas, the moves you do are all designed to help balance the chakras again. They're very connected to opening up each chakra, is working with the energy, them in bringing the energy into that part of the body. So those things are very much going to be helpful, maintaining a practice that keeps you as balanced as possible and taking that practice into whatever is pulling you out of it. Now, we are here speaking about this, so we right now are not in the middle of the war. We have our fears, we have our worries about elections, about economy, about finances and stuff like that. And, worst case scenarios going into wars or, diseases. Um, and the earth itself is moving, so we're seeing weather pattern changes. So there's, a lot of change. And I think with just like the midwife might say, you have to let go and go with the birth and not fight it. It's like learning, what am I fighting? What am I trying to repress in myself? I just don't want to think of that bad thing. So I'm going to, watch TV for a while, but that I pushed it away. I'm repressing it, so it's dealing with ourself. I mean, that is
mm,
probably the best step that you can do. And you always know. For example, I just knew I needed to change my dietary habits again about a year ago, and I knew it for like 6 months, but I would just put it off and I wouldn't really follow through. And when I finally did it, I was like, why didn't I do it sooner? This is so great. It's so great eating like
mm,
this, and I feel so much better. And the same with starting, a really good yoga class consistently, you know, bringing in the things that support and help. And we go around the spiral. I get on a really good track and I go for a while, and then I fall off a little bit, and then sometimes I'll let myself fall even further, and I just have to bring myself back. So,
Mm.
I think on some level, when we sit with ourselves and we take some space, we all know what we have to do. We just don't always do it. Getting the impetus to take a step or move forward, reach out, join a group, join a meditation group, go to a Unitarian church, go to a church, go to a church, go to a community, step out of your comfort zone a little bit, go to a yoga class. I don't know.
Thank you, Melissa. I think this is so key and powerful, actually. And um, before we wrap up the conversation, because it's already almost an hour, which I cannot believe we've talked that long, because it goes so fast, hearing your perspectives. So what for people who would love to explore like these kind of practices, with you, like what would be the best trajectories, to connect with your work? Because I
Well,
think it's also very important for people to have resources and practical resources.
Well, my website is wisdomword.com. And so you can go to WisdomWord and look at what, group offerings are going on. If you're not available in the time zones, there's plenty of things classes that can order 8-week series, 10-week series, or even just 1 hour class, recordings of. You can listen to recordings. I do offer individual sessions. It's on I'm still doing individual sessions for people who want to get a more detailed map of, how to step into their own sovereignty or, what direction to go into. Because I think sometimes the minds get overwhelmed with all the information and it takes a while to bring it
Sure.
down. So it's helpful to have someone do a reading for you and look at the energy body and look at what might come up, you know. So that can be helpful too. And we have free calls, and we do post some of the recordings of those for the chakra attunements on Mondays, Wednesday, and Saturdays. So we try to keep out there. I'm working on building up my YouTube channel. I also have a YouTube channel that has hours and hours of clips from channelings from the different ascended masters, such as Michael the Archangel or Kuan Yin. Some videos. Hopefully, we'll be able to put this up on the YouTube channel too, as well.
We will.
Yeah.
We will. Thank you so much, dear Melissa. It's always, always a pleasure to see you and connect with you. And thank you for your immense wisdom. Thank you so much.
I really appreciate just connecting. Number one, it's just such a pleasure to speak with you. And then the fact that you're putting this out in your world as I'm putting it out in my world, it's like the pebbles in the pools are making the bigger pool. And that's what I see kind of happening all over the world. So that's wonderful.
Exactly.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.